That was Mr. Ward, no longer the Lib Dem candidate for Bradford East. To discuss this, we're joined by James Serene, used to work for Nick Clegg, is now the Chief Executive of the Britain-Israel Communications and Research Centre. David Ward said his sacking is designed to stop supporters of the Palestinians being elected. Is he right?
Oh, that's absolute nonsense. I mean, people in this country have a very vigorous debate about foreign policy issues. There are lots of debates about Israel and the Palestinians and how to solve that conflict. I mean, that's just a smokescreen that's thrown up by people like David Ward to try and make it seem like he's being silenced. I mean, if he wanted to engage in a sensible debate about Israel and the Palestinians, then he, of course, would have been welcome to do so. But what he did do was engage in a very dark side of that kind of discussion, which quite quickly trips into anti-Semitism. And we mentioned the new definition of anti-Semitism that was talked about in the House. He pretty much ticked every box of the guidance notes of what that definition actually is.
Look, I'll come back to that in a minute. So Mr. Farron, in your view, was right to sack David Ward?
I believe he was right.
OK, so what, in terms of the definition of anti-Semitism, what is it that Mr. Ward has said that was anti-Semitic, as opposed to being very strongly, perhaps even virulently, anti-Israel?
Well, I mean, if you look at the tweets that he's written and the blogs also that he's written, he has various themes. There's a kind of dangerous fantasy about Israel no longer existing or Israel not existing anymore. He supported Naz Shah with this ridiculous comment about Israelis being transferred to America. He equates Israel's treatment of the Palestinians with the Holocaust, which is in the guidance notes of that definition, as something that absolutely should not be done and should be avoided.
He said that if he'd lived in the Gaza Strip, he'd probably fire rockets at Israel too. Now, that is, for a British parliamentarian, I think most people would agree, a stupid thing to say. But is it anti-Semitic?
I wouldn't necessarily think that that particular comment is anti-Semitic, but I think, you know...
He talks then about the apartheid state of Israel. Now, to call Israel an apartheid state is a long-standing meme of those who are very anti-Israel. But is that anti-Semitic as opposed to being, as I say, virulently anti-Israel?
Well, I think there are ways to talk about it, and I think, you know, just that particular comment may or may not be. It depends on the context, and it depends what he's doing. But if you look at the totality of his beliefs and what he has said, there are very clear themes there, which are basically anti-Semitism. They are not trying to have a sensible debate about Israel and the Palestinians. I mean, my entire career is based on sensible discussions in this country about Israel and the Palestinians. What he is doing is not that.
Was Tim Farron right to sack David Ward?
Yes, he was. Because if you look at, I mean, I looked at some of the detailed stuff that he'd said, and what David does is he consistently confuses his very clear opposition to the Israeli government, which I do all the time. The current Israeli administration. I think lots of people within Britain's Jewish communities would have huge concerns about the current Israeli administration, and he confuses that with Jews. And a couple of comments that he's made are about what he feels Jews are doing to Palestinians.
Well,
but
yeah,
actually, that's where the kind
you
of...
said that, because I was looking through a lot of the things that he's said. I've not been through it all by any means. And a lot of what he said, it seemed to me, well, that you're clearly a real enemy of Israel, but that is not always the same as being anti-Semitic. But then I saw one thing when he said the Jews, not Israel. He said the Jews are inflicting atrocities on Palestinians. And I thought that may have been the use of Jews rather than
Well, it's an absolute classic meme, as you said, of anti-Semites that they will talk about the Holocaust and talk about Israelis being like Nazis. It's an absolutely classic... it's the most offensive thing that you could possibly do. And you can talk about Israel, you could talk about all sorts of Middle East issues. You don't need to use Nazi imagery to make your point. And it's clearly designed to be offensive. You're back in the Ken Livingstone issue of, like, why defend Naz Shah by talking about Hitler? I mean, it's very transparent, and it's very clear what they're trying to do. And it's not a dog whistle. It's like an air raid siren for these followers. They know what's being talked about, and they jump in on it.
I mean, James is absolutely right. This is exactly one of the things I talk about, because I talk about these issues all the time. And I say, how can, you know, why would you even reach for the Holocaust or Hitler? You know, why would you? How can these actually be answers to what's happening in the Middle East? And interestingly, what was you know, when Nashar said what she did, for which she apologised, and I think she's been brilliant in the way that she's actually dealt with this issue. She actually said, yeah, that was a really stupid cartoon. I shouldn't have put it out. Made a mistake. So for anybody to be coming out and supporting a cartoon for which the original MP apologised for, I think in itself was a daft thing to do.
But you've said that British citizens who volunteer to fight in the Israeli army should be treated as foreign fighters and prosecuted on their return to Britain.
What I have said is that if you are British and you want to fight, then you fight for an army and you fight for Britain only. That's a very clear view that I have. And that is whether you are British Pakistani, British Indian, British Israeli, British whatever you may happen to be. I think the law in this area is unclear.
So but should they be prosecuted? So if you join the US Army or the French Foreign Legion, if you come back to Britain, you should be prosecuted?
And this is the issue. At the moment, the law is unclear as to who you join and which bit you join and how you're prosecuted when you come back. So I think to clear up all of this and to make it absolutely clear where we stand, if you are British and you want to fight, you fight for the British Armed Forces and you fight for no one else.
OK, we'll leave it there. James Serene, thank you for coming in today. Now, we did ask David Ward to come on the programme, but he declined.